All right. So one thing that I hear a lot of people talk about is hunger. And really what hunger means is can be a twofold kind of scenario. So if you're always hungry, there is typically an explanation for that. There's going to be a reason that your appetite is through the roof. And we're going to look at some scenarios as to why that may be, and how we can fix that or mitigate it some to some degree. So First off, what actually drives hunger? So hunger isn't just you have an empty stomach because you haven't eaten a lot, which kind of in correlation is going to mean automatic hunger. It's going to be controlled by hormones, meal timing, and stress. So just because that you haven't eaten a big meal or you haven't eaten in a while, that does not automate the signals that say, all right, you're hungry, right? This is controlled by a vast majority of things. Many different things go into the concept of hunger. So if we look at the actual hormones that talk about hunger, you have leptin and you have ghrelin. Ghrelin tells you that you need to eat, you are hungry, and leptin tells you to stop eating, you are full. Blood sugar swings can also influence cravings as well too. That's why that I'm not a big fan of people just having random snacks throughout the day that does not include a complete protein or some fats or a vast mix of two, or both of them. If it's just a straight carbohydrate snack, you're going to see that blood glucose spike way up and then come back down in a pretty hard crash. So these blood sugar swings can also influence pretty intense cravings as well too. And then we have the obvious things like lack of stress, or no, a lot of stress, lack of sleep, and the actual diet type that you are trying to follow can all have different impacts on what hunger looks like for you specifically. So, if we're speaking in terms of a cut, a fat loss phase, why are you actually hungry in a cut? So, some hunger is going to be normal. You just have to lean into that. If you are um, going through a fat loss phase and you are hungry and you're a bit uncomfortable, well, I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but probably the several months leading up to this, several years leading up to this, you've been very comfortable. You've been eating in a surplus. You've been eating any and everything that you have probably wanted to eat. So in that scenario, get uncomfortable, lean into the hunger a little bit. But if it comes to the point to where it's relentless hunger, it's all day long, it's all that you think about. You're just counting down the seconds, the minutes, the hours in between your next meal, which is kind of relatable to bodybuilding prep in an aspect. That's where we need to stop and look at things and see if there's something else that we can do to help mitigate that. Um, because that relentless hunger all day long, that's not what we're after. So if we have meals too far apart, or we have meals that are very low in protein, or low in fiber intake, that's going to cause hunger as well too. So if you're having a breakfast, lunch, and dinner, or you're eating your breakfast at 6 a.m., lunch is at 12, and then dinner's at 8 p.m., you have a span between the first two meals of the day, that's 6 hours. And then you have a span of lunch and dinner, 8 hours. That's a pretty big span. And then if you look at the overnight aspect, that's what, 10 hours in between meals. So to me, that's way too long to be going in between meals. That's where, having maybe three set meals, breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and then a small snack in between each of those meals can kind of help mitigate that hunger, and also help control blood sugar swings as well too. And then if we look at not having enough carbohydrates to support your training performance or your recovery, um, so if we're, obviously in a cut, our food is very low, and we don't have enough carbs around your training, or if we have enough to go toward bedtime as well too, that bedtime meal, that's obviously going to cause hunger, to drive up, and then again can cause cravings, and drive that hunger even further, which could then lead to binge eating and a number of things on that side of the coin. And then we look at eating low calorie junk, that spikes and crashes your insulin. So, um, I think the one that always comes to my mind is if you go to Walmart, Aldi, Publix, whatever, and you see the little 100 calorie snack packs of Oreos. It's like these little thin, It's like it looks like a quarter almost. It's like the thickness of a quarter, and it's about the size of a quarter, but it's a Oreo, right? Um, it's listed as healthy because that whole packet is under 100 calories. But if we're eating low calorie junk like that, again, that's going to be a lot of carbohydrates, not a lot of protein, not a lot of fat. It's just straight carbohydrates. Again, that's going to spike your insulin up, and then it's going to come back down, crashing, leading to more and more cravings. So yeah, you could eat, one of those 100 calorie Oreo packets to maybe subside a craving in that moment, but then maybe an hour or two later, you're craving something else again because that blood sugar rose so high and then spiked back down pretty abruptly. And then we look at artificial sweeteners or chewing too much gum. Chewing gum is a big one that a lot of people don't think about as something that could be detrimental to their processes as well too. So if you think about it, if you're an individual who chews a lot of gum, you're constantly chewing, you're constantly intaking a lot of air into your stomach as well too. So if you chew a lot of gum, you may end up having a lot of gas. You may end up having a lot of burping episodes. You may end up having a lot of gas on your stomach. So again, like that could chewing gum in an essence, also is going to have a lot of these artificial sweeteners in there as well too. That could, mess with um, maybe giving a false sense of there's trying to think of the best way to explain this. Um, it may be giving a false reality that you're getting something from this chewing gum when in essence it's very empty calories, and we're not even talking about the aspect of counting calories from chewing gum. But again, it could be something that um, mentally causes you to say, okay, I'm cool, fine and dandy. I've had a piece of gum. Then 10 minutes later, you're chewing another piece of gum, right? And then that could just spiral down into something like, oh well, there's a here's an energy drink over here. Here's a diet soda over here. Like, let's keep compounding those artificial sweeteners, again and again and again and again. And there are studies that show that for the most part, artificial sweeteners aren't terrible for you, but they surely aren't good on your gut health, and your gut microbiome if consumed in very large quantities. So, again, that's just something that can artificially inflate hunger as well too. And then if we kind of back off of that as far as these artificial sweeteners and chewing too much gum, inflammation or gut issues, causing that systemic stress to go up, which in an essence will cause hunger cravings, things of that nature as well too. Now, what about if you're hungry in a bulk? Yes, you can be hungry in a bulk as well. And I mean, I think that definitely has its perks as well too. If you're, eating a good bit of food, you're growing, your body is utilizing the food properly, and you are still somewhat hungry. To me, that typically signals that your insulin sensitivity is still in a pretty good spot. If you're not checking that and keeping an eye on that, because if your body is hungry, your leptin and ghrelin levels are obviously telling you something that may need more food, right? So if we look at things, if we're hungry in a bulk, and you're intaking a lot of food, it may be just as simple as you're consuming a lot of fast digesting carbs without low fiber or low fiber fat in most of those meals. So the typical chicken and rice meals that does not have a lot of fiber, that does not have a lot of fat, is going to go through you very quickly. Again, causing that hunger to go up. High calorie meals that don't inflate stomach volume, which is like a low volume meal. So, like for instance, we all know of like when people go do dirty bulks and they go to McDonald's and get, a McDouble or something, right? Like that is a very small, volume of food. That's what 4 to 500 calories. That small volume of food, in comparison to 500 calories of chicken and rice, is going to be triple to four times the amount of volume, right? So again, like if you're using high calorie foods that are very low volume, such as like, junk food in an essence, then you are going to be hungry in an essence. That's why that I like to eat. If I'm doing things like, chicken and rice, I'll add like almond butter to the meal. Or make sure that I have some sort of greens in there to drive that fiber intake up as well too. If your training intensity goes up, your appetite signals typically go up as well too. So if your training intensity, or the weight that you're able to use goes up while you're in a bulk, and that should always be the case for the most part, that appetite signals are going to go up. Um, Again, blood sugar swings from inconsistent meal timing. I mean, if you're eating a ton of food and you don't have a plan as how to get that food in across the day, your meals are probably very inconsistent. You're probably backloading a lot of those meals later in the day, and then having inconsistent meal timing, especially if you're eating 4 to 5 thousand calories a day, just in an essence can cause digestion issues and things of that nature. So, if you're eating 3, 4, 5 thousand calories a day and you don't have your meal time set out very, timely, and you're actually pretty precise with that, you're going to see blood sugar swings, especially if you have, again, a lot of these meals that are fast digesting carbs without, fiber, lower fat in those meals. And then your actual hormonal drive to eat more, when gaining lean mass is a component in that as well too. And so, hunger versus appetite. How do we know the difference? Are you actually hungry, and wanting to eat more? Um, these two are not mutually exclusive. These are not always the same thing. So, hunger and appetite don't go hand in hand. They're not tit for tat. So, hunger is going to be that physical, biological need to eat. You need to eat something. Like your hunger is there. For you to function, you biologically need to eat. That is the hunger. Now, with your appetite, this is going to equate to your desire to eat. This can be triggered by emotions or just out of pure habit. So if you're cutting, you're going to feel hunger with low food. That's kind of a common sense, right? Now, bulking, you might feel, more hunger because of insulin swings or lack of variety in your meals. So if we're looking at, if we want to see, is it actual hunger or is it just your appetite? One good way to do this is the apple test. So the apple test is a mental check-in with yourself to determine if the hunger that you're feeling is physical or is it emotional, right? You want to ask yourself, all right, here's an apple. Do I want to eat an apple? If you say yes, you would eat the apple, then you are likely experiencing physical hunger because your body will take any kind of fuel that you're offering, right? If you say no, you're like, no, I don't really want an apple. I probably want, chips or a chocolate chip cookie or something, right? Then that's emotional hunger or it's a craving. You aren't really hungry, at this point in time. If you can push onward, push onward. Another one would be the water test. If you're hungry and you're thinking about that you need to eat something, drink 16 to 20 ounces of water, set your timer on your phone, wait 15 to 20 minutes, come back to it and say, am I still hungry? If you say, yeah, I am kind of hungry, it could be, that you are physically hungry and you need something to eat. If that hunger signaling went away, then you were probably just thirsty, if anything else, that was causing that craving to go up. And then, that kind of touches another point of if you're dehydrated, that could also cause your hunger signaling to be, incorrect. It could tell you that you're hungry when in essence you're just thirsty and slightly dehydrated. So how to fix this, even if it's in the bulk or the cut. So this all starts from the ground up, about like everything else that I tell you guys on this call every single week. Stop guessing. Audit yourself. Structure your meals to control hunger first. So make sure that you're eating every 3 to 5 hours. No long fast. Don't wake up at 5 a.m. and intermittent fast up until 2 o'clock. And then you're ravenous from 2 to 8 in your eating window. I'm not a big fan of it. Some people do it with success, but if you're having hunger issues, binging episode issues, then that's not something that I would recommend. And make sure that your meals are built around a protein, a good fibrous veggie, and a slow carb. And this little asterisk here, this depends on if it's pre, post, intra, training meal. If it's away from training, close to training, obviously, if it's a close to training, we want faster digesting carbs. Meals outside of that, training window, and then, before bed, slower carbs. But make sure that just each meal has a balanced amount of protein, carbs, inadequate amount of fat as well too, and then a fiber a fibrous veggie if we can. And then again, have adequate fiber spaced out throughout the day. Walk after each meal if you can to control those blood sugar cravings, and just get those digestion walks in as well too. And then obviously sleep, 7 to 9 hours a night, just really to regulate everything, not just including appetite hormones, but just to make sure that obviously we're recovering, and we're not starting the day off in the hole in the deficit, on the aspect of a recovery, which, if we're in the hole on that side of things too, hunger is going to be through the roof typically, which if you're in a fat loss phase can cause binging episodes, falling off plan, things of that nature. So, um, in an essence, hunger is just one of those things to where you have to be mentally strong enough to recognize, is it actual hunger or is it appetite? And then from that standpoint, just do one of those two tests, either the apple test or the water test. I like to do the water test. Honestly, if I'm hungry and if I'm in a cut, I'll grab my gallon of water, I'll chug it, I'll come back in 10 minutes. So like, am I actually hungry? No, I was just thirsty. But there are obviously other different ways to go about that, but that's the one that I prefer to use personally.